In these 3 lectures, we'll look at more complex layout using CSS HTML, adding to the prior discussion on flow-based layouts. And we'll introduce what is almost sure to be the modern CSS approach to layout in the next couple of segments, and that's flexboxes. Now, in earlier lectures, we saw how to coax HTML and CSS into laying out a set of tabs with some limited control over vertical layout via clear fixes and the like. Let's look now at what it takes to create a layout common to many applications, the proverbial 3-column liquid layout. This is the standard 3-column arrangement you often see in web pages, with a fixed left column, often showing navigation links, a fixed right column giving ads or other information and so forth, and then an expanding and contracting middle column of main text or other content. The middle column occupies all room not needed by the fixed left and right columns, and adjusts its width liquidly or fluidly as the overall page width changes. Here's an example using the grail.html and grail.css files that are supplied with the lecture. There are, by the way, also Grail 1 and Grail 2 versions with answers for some questions below. Don't look at them until you've done the in-lecture questions, please. So, as you can see, when I scroll this thing, or scale this thing back and forth, the 2 side columns remain fixed, and the middle column, liquidly, as the term goes, changes its width. And while we're at it, here is the same thing in Chrome. That was Firefox earlier. Here's Chrome. And while we're at it, to be fair to older technology, here is IE. And as we move on with CSS and HTML, we'll more often show our examples working in different browser versions, and you'll be asked to do the same for exercises. So the term liquid or fluid is used in web layout to mean a layout at least one part of which adjusts with the size of the larger page. Now that's something so routine in non-web GUI design as to be trite, but we'll see as we discuss here, it turns out to be so hard to do in CSS and HTML that hundreds of pages of research, if you want to call it that, have been posted on how to get HTML, CSS to do this simple thing, especially without the use of HTML tables, which are deprecated by many designers because of their inflexibility of appearance and the need to put style information directly into the HTML. Finding an elegant way to do 3-column layout has been such a quest that it's been given the term the Holy Grail layout. In this lecture, as I sometimes do, I'll ask you to stop the recording now and read a classic online source explaining 3-column layout. This is Matt Levine's In Search of the Holy Grail. This link appears in our bibliography, and it is so well done that it's been referenced by thousands of other pages. I couldn't improve on it. Instead, I'd like you to read the article carefully for 10 to 15 minutes, and then we'll do a few in-lecture questions using our own Grail example, and build a few variations on Levine's model to be sure you understand how it works. So, returning now, after perhaps 15 minutes of side reading, here are our questions. Question 1. The center div in Levine's sample HTML and also in our Grail HTML shown here is listed first, with the left and right divs after it. Now, does this matter? And why, if so? Yes, it does matter. The adjustment of the left div's margin by negative 100% presumes that the left div starts at the right of the center div and moves the left div to the left to line up with the center div before being further adjusted by the right 200px property. This negative 100% margin is probably the hardest thing to get straight in the example, so let's reiterate what Levine said point by point. Number 1, the container style leaves padding on the left and the right for the fixed columns. 2. That means that the 100% width refers only to the center area, since width doesn't take padding into account, and the center style will occupy just that width. A margin left of positive 100% would move the content of the left div 100% to the right to accommodate a wide left margin. So by logical extension, a margin left of negative 100% moves the content of the left div to the left, like some sort of anti-margin. And then finally, that means that the minus 100% margin lines up the left edges of the center and left div contents. And then finally, the right 200px setting means move further left to give an additional 200 pixels of room between you and the right margin of the container. It does not, note, mean move to the right 200 pixels. That wouldn't be correct here. So this brings the left div content to the correct final location. And this brings us to question 2. Modify the supplied grail.html and grail.css files, what we've just been looking at here, to provide 2 center columns, center 1 and center 2, each liquid and of the same width. And be sure they expand and contract in width in parallel, as I'll show here, like that. So, coming back from a pause, the way I did it was to take or to add 2 center columns, center 1 and center 2, to the HTML, and then to give them each a width of 50%. And that was all it took. But, you know, it doesn't look too good because they're so crammed against one another, so let's modify it a little bit so that they have some space between each other and between the left and right divs, as I'll show here. Like that, with a bit of margin. Again, doing that for your own code and coming back from a pause. Here's how I did it, and this, by the way, is now Grail 1 in its complete form, .css, and that is to have a width of 40% for those 2 center columns. And by the way, remember that in selector notation in CSS, you can have a this or that one, both, with a comma separating them. So this applies to both of those IDs. And then we have a margin on each side of 5% to make up a total of 50% for each of them. Remember that you'd have to reduce width to 40% because it doesn't take margins into account. So here's question 4. Starting again from the original Grail HTML and Grail CSS, keep a single liquid column, but put both the right and left columns side by side to its left, as I'll show here. Thus. And coming back from a pause there, answer 4. I did this by adjusting the left style so that the right shift was 350 pixels instead. The left, or the margin left, I'm sorry, remains negative 100% to get the left column first aligned with the left edge of the center column, as before. And then we apply a further shift of 350 pixels. This leaves a room between them of 150 pixels for the right column to fit into, and the right column now has a style that is the same sort of thing as the left column did before, and instead with the right shift of 150 pixels and a width of 150 pixels, and that slips it in between the left and the center. Now, if you got these questions, then you understand the classic 3-column layout. In the next segments, we'll look at the more modern and powerful way to do this sort of layout using an HTML5 feature, the Flexbox.